Welcome to a new episode of These Go to 11. Let's turn it up. Hey everybody, welcome back to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. This not only helps us to get our content out there, but also helps us to find out what you, our faithful listeners, think. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Greg Dutcher. Greg, what's going on, man?
Dude, I'm doing well. I know we're a couple weeks post-Easter, but yeah. I love that we're still talking about Easter.
Yes.
You know, it's one of those things I think sometimes Christmas and the implications of God's Son invading human history, we could probably talk about that other than December.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the resurrection.
That's right.
Other than Easter Sunday. I mean, considering it looks like the church moved its date of standard regular Saturday worship practice as a result of that newness of life, all that Easter represents. So
yeah,
I'm pumped.
And we talked about this last week, right? That this is what the early church fathers, this is what the early church believers did. They kept bringing up the resurrection of Christ because of how important it is.
Yeah.
And we can't ever forget it. And so, we typically hang out at Christmas one season a year.
Yep.
But we never get out of the resurrection. We never get out of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And so, it's great that, like you said, we're spending these next several weeks just talking about his resurrection. This is what we hang our hats on.
I like it too, dude, because, this past Easter, my focus, I did that little Easter week series on the eyewitnesses. And Easter, I took sort of the tact with, what would this have been like through Matthew's eyes?
Yeah.
And just to recap super, super quickly on that, Matthew was the tax collector. So in a sense, he bets on Jesus.
Yep.
He does his internal calculus and thinks, I got a steady job. I've already torched every relationship. My kinsmen most certainly see me as a traitor and a turncoat.
Right.
But at least I got a nice steady income. But now this Jesus person who I've heard so much about, the buzz in Capernaum's electric, it's like he bets on him.
Yeah.
So once Jesus dies and the disciples scatter and they're hiding like cowards, as we talked about last time.
Yep.
Or two, I can't remember.
It was last time.
Yeah, it was on the last cast. What is it like for Matthew? That was kind of my angle on Easter and what Easter might have meant through his eyes. And it's a window for all of us.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, to the outside world, and I'm using betting on Jesus, tongue firmly implanted in my cheek.
Right.
But really from the outside perspective, that's how probably a lot of people understand. Yeah, well, this guy bets on this whole Jesus thing being real. And Matthew certainly could have been understood like that. He trashed his life for the sake of a steady paycheck.
Yeah.
Then he gives up the steady paycheck.
Right.
To follow Jesus, and then he's dead.
Yeah.
And that time before the resurrection. Woo! So what did Easter mean to Matthew when he saw it? So that was Easter.
Yep.
But every Easter, dude, I drive home and I think, oh my goodness. I wish I'd said that. I say that every week.
Right.
But especially about a topic like this.
Yeah.
So that's why I love we're doing it this month.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole point of this podcast, right? Is it's, an unchurchy podcast that we do. It's things that, I think our last tagline when we first were doing the podcast was, ADHD conversation about things that you don't typically get to talk about on a Sunday morning.
And now, of course, I have no ADHD. Lady in the church gave me the best definition on that.
I remember you telling me about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was the attention deficit. Hey, donuts.
Yeah.
That's just perfect, man. That's perfect. But you're right. Yeah, actually, dude, that is the whole purpose of this cast, is that we get to talk. Actually, we can say the true reason, dude, is that our wives are tired of hearing us talk. So Nathan and I just have each other. We're like, well, Joy and Lisa don't want to hear diddly about what we got to say anymore. They got more important things to do. So we get together and hear ourselves talk. No, but we, in all seriousness, it just shows no subject can ever be exhausted.
Right.
Even with a podcast.
Right.
But it does take us a little deeper.
Oh, yeah.
And I love, if the resurrection is what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, as we said last time, that if he didn't rise from the dead, this whole, honestly, dude, if we somehow had empirical, case closed evidence, no resurrection of Jesus, dude, I mean, we should just turn this over to the Red Cross, this building we're in, close up shop, just, give the money to some humanitarian cause. And we've collected and we're using to fund missionaries and all this, and say, hey, we're going to regroup. That's how Paul defines the stakes.
Yeah.
And when he says we're of all men most to be pitied.
Yes.
The most miserable men.
Yes.
Those are the stakes.
Right.
It's not a light thing. Like, well, Christianity adds a little improvement.
Right.
And a little spice of life. Man.
Well, and I mean, again, the reality is, I mean, you swung to the humanitarian way, but let's swing to the other way. I mean, Stalin was certainly heavily influenced by atheism, the complete absence of God. And, so when we talk about this idea of, all right, if the resurrection is not real, if our faith is dead and not real, what are we ultimately left with then?
Dude, that is a great point, a sobering point, that you could just go the path of complete self-indulgent, every man for himself, materialism. Sure. I mean, that's an option.
Yeah.
People could take, because in a sense you're challenging, well, if there's no resurrection, what you're really saying is life is very, very short.
Right.
We all, I guess, I don't know, become dirt to fertilize somebody's garden.
Right.
And why are we messing around with humanitarian causes?
Right.
We're all on this sinking ship anyway. Just get as much as you can, much pleasure, much money.
Yeah.
Look out for yourself. I mean, that's an option people take.
Yeah.
That reject any thought of this. So that's actually another good point.
Well,
ways you could go.
And let's be real. As much as people might tout the whole God and country thing.
Yeah.
The not resurrections.
Ooh, we got a new
theme.
The
insurrections.
Yes.
That we would see going on in governments are clearly not the work of Bible-believing Christians.
Right.
I mean, you look at Paul, and when he speaks in Romans under an oppressive emperor like Nero, who is delighting in burning Christians and throwing them into the Colosseum. I mean, and Paul says, no, that government that's doing all these things to us, guess what?
Yeah.
That was established by God.
Right.
And so we are to honor that government because ultimately God has put them in charge over us.
Right.
And so, until they call us, which they did, to stop preaching the gospel,
right,
we will do everything they say except for stop preaching the gospel.
Absolutely, dude.
And that's the reality, right? Is any aspect of society that we look at, any allegiance that we as believers give to any credence of morality, any honor and respect to parents, to the authorities over us, it doesn't matter if those things are based in secular culture or Christian culture. They were established in God.
Yeah.
And so that's why everything is the way it is. That's why deep down we long for government and justice, and we long for peace. We long to see, those who cannot help themselves. We long to help them, all of these things. This is rooted in God. And so the Bible's very clear. If there is no God, then, where do we go from there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's unthinkable. We've commented on this, Nathan. This is resurrection related, but it's more general too. Like you're saying, I find life hard with Jesus.
Yes.
when you taste that, it's almost unimaginable to think of life without him.
Yes.
I'm in awe sometimes of people. I mean it in a kind, affirming way. I really do. People that can get through some of life's hardest trials.
Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks ago, dude, we had another school shooting. At the Christian. School.
That was just like you said, just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and so you've got that, just this unspeakable act of evil and horror that happens, and I feel for those involved, the victims, families and their parents, and I believe that the pastor's daughter of the church,
little 9-year-old girl,
9-year-old little girl,
yeah,
along with 2 other 9-year-old students and 3 staff members, and you just think of the families, and that's just one incident of so many in this world, and I think, okay, I at least know probably several of those people have the Lord in their life.
Yes.
And it's going to be so difficult these coming days and months and years. And sometimes it gives me the chills to think of that. So tie this to the resurrection and what is lost if Christ did not rise again.
Yeah.
And his resurrection, if it happened,
right,
and we certainly believe that it did, it assures us that a life that was lived 9 years on this life continues.
Yes.
Right? So all the struggle with the futility of it and the counterintuitive, shocking nature of a life that would be snuffed out that young. Now, while it certainly doesn't solve all of our emotional pain in this life, it opens up hope.
Right.
Oh, my goodness, Christ defeated death.
Right.
We know it because he was walking around after he died and spoke of this kingdom and spoke of this resurrection for ourselves. I mean, the stakes they couldn't be higher.
Yeah. Well, and I love how you said he was walking around, right? Yeah. Because I often feel like there's such a misconception of what is eternity going to look like? And we're in this misconception that we're going to be in we're going to be these, disembodied spirits floating around the clouds, playing harps.
Yep.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. The Bible clearly states that no, you're given another body.
Yep.
You're going to dwell on the earth. Mm-hmm. Those relationships that you had on earth, guess what? Many of those, if those were believers, you will still maintain those relationships, but they'll be perfect.
Oh, sure.
And
we've talked about this, dude, which I think we've probably casted on this before, and we probably should again.
Yeah.
But we've said, I get why a lot of people, even adults, but a lot of kids are freaked out about heaven.
Yeah.
If we don't emphasize everything you just covered.
Yeah.
The physicality of it. So I've come to tell my kids, guys, it won't be the same, but heaven has much more in common with that awesome day we had at Hershey Park.
Yes.
Than it will have with whatever thought you have of the harps and the clouds. I mean, what in the world?
Right.
Where did that idea come from?
Right.
It's so ubiquitous. I find it everywhere where people are, kind of freaked out because. And why wouldn't we be? We live in a physical body in a physical world. That's how God designed us before sin entered the world.
Yes.
It's not like, well, we were a disembodied spirit, sin entered the world, we got stuck with. No.
Right.
Bodies, food, relationships, color, sound, smells, texture, all these wonderful things.
Innovation, travel, all of these things. Dude, discovery,
instruments, right? Civilization, building, recreation, family, all these things. And then that's how God started things out. But heaven is going to be, there's Lawrence Welk music playing in the background. There's a little bubble machine. There's little puffs of cloud that go by, and I hope mine's big enough to hold my chubby cherub himself. Oh my goodness, dude, that's like a fever dream when I'm sick. It's like I got the flu and I'm having some fever dream. Hard pass.
Well, and not only Paul seems to say a hard pass on that too.
Yes.
I mean, he emphasizes,
2 Corinthians 5.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we just, the concept again of the resurrection and how comforting that is, looking at Jesus in his resurrected form. here with his disciples, the scars that will be there for all eternity, that we will admire and just see, man, this is my Savior.
Yes.
And you remember when we had Elise Fitzpatrick on, she had that thought, imagine you're sitting down with a group of friends and you're having a picnic and just talking about whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And Jesus just comes along. Hey guys, how's it going?
Yeah.
Let me join you.
I remember that. It's an awesome picture.
Yeah.
It's just, and again, much more true.
Yes.
To the portrait we have in Scripture of our hope. So, yeah, dude, let's kick some evidence, man. Because I did want to say, Nathan, it's funny, in the time since we've last podcasted, had another conversation with my son. Ironically, wasn't planned. It just sort of came up. And, it's too long of a conversation to summarize. Let me just say the takeaway for me in that conversation, and I think my son would say the same thing, was, wow, if we, of all the things to study, to try to put in your memory tank, the resurrection, because remember last time I said, if we tell our kids their only hope is to defend every aspect of the Bible.
Right.
It's going to be 1 in a million kids that do that.
Right.
They're probably going to be very intellectually advanced.
Yeah.
They're probably going to have some natural intuition and interest in things that most young 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids do not.
Right.
Like Near Eastern history and, there's a lot. So, because, I every kid that goes to a secular college, I was one, my kids have done it, and I've known so many people that have, you're going to get that. It's usually a class like history and literature of the Old Testament. Right. Or some version of that class. That's what I had. That's what they've had.
Yep.
And you're going to have a guy who has a PhD, who's well-educated, might be funny, warm, kind, and they are going to, quote unquote, I'm air quoting on an audio podcast. Right. They are, quote unquote, going to dismantle the Bible.
Yes.
I think you and I would both say, well, they're really not, but the effect in a young person's mind, oh my goodness, I never knew about this. I never knew about that. And are we saying that our kids have to be coached from the time they're 12 or 13 to know every nuance of apologetics? I think they should know some.
Sure.
But the resurrection is so rich. And I'm telling you, when you get a hold of that, again, most skeptics I know aren't really prepared to talk about that.
Right.
They might be prepared to talk about, what's one of the big ones, dude? God commanding the Israelites to kill the Canaanites.
Yeah, genocide, quote unquote.
Genocide, ethnic cleansing, these kinds of arguments, or they homophobia, slavery, right? And neither of us are saying those things don't matter. Right. We're going to do casts on those subjects as well and bring in people and talk about those. But again, it's not. We're not telling our kids to tell their professors or their friends those things are unimportant. But hey, actually though, basis of my faith isn't on what you're saying, on the nature of homosexuality or the nature of whether there was genocide in the Old Testament. The basis of my faith is because Jesus died and came back.
Yes.
So then you can ask that question. We keep saying, if you met somebody that predicted and pulled off his own death, then resurrection. So I always put it in modern times, Nathan. Like, imagine you and I are talking, we're comparing schedules like we do all the time when we plan our podcast. Hey, no, that Tuesday night won't work. You enjoy, have a commitment. Shoot, Sunday afternoon won't work that day. We're taking Ben back to school. That date'll work. What if one of these times I said, the only thing is, that Wednesday I'm going to die. So tell you what, let's meet on Saturday when I'm alive again. Like, all you have to do sometimes is take this story we're used to and put it in modern parlance. And you're like, what? But that's what we're saying. And so to get somebody to say, imagine that, because at first they might picture it in stained glass and some ethereal fairy tale. No.
Yeah.
What we're saying about the heart of the Christian faith is like that.
Yes.
There was a man who said, I'm always fascinated with what you do. Afterwards, I will meet you on this mountain and I will give you these directions. After what? Oh, after I'm dead.
Right.
What?
Right.
I mean, it's shocking.
Yeah.
So I love just kind of starting there. And then if a person will give you even a mild hearing,
yes,
and you ask them to consider, so let me ask you, if he did come back from the dead,
yes,
what do you think?
yes.
I mean, most of us have never met somebody that's done that.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, let's start there.
Yes.
And equip our kids to think deeply about this subject. So,
because the reality is, as you said it so great, we cannot prepare them for every little argument that comes. And so
impossible.
let's say I prepare them for 15 out of 20 arguments.
Right.
So now the professor's introducing them to 5 new arguments that I have not prepared them for. And that's where those doubts start coming in.
Course.
I mean, the reality is, I just talked about this with my students, I gave them a very time to wake up moment spiritually. And I said, we're talking about the assurance of the believer. I said, okay, who in here has struggled with their faith?
Yeah.
Either because they were embarrassed or whatever. Nobody raised their hand. And I had said, nope, never.
Yeah.
We're talking about juniors in high school.
Sure.
I said, okay. First of all, I didn't necessarily believe them.
Yeah.
But second, I said, now, if you haven't, and guys, just please understand this. I'm not saying this to be mean or cruel. I'm saying this to be honest. If you have not, you will.
Of course.
Because that's just the truth about being a believer. Like the story of Thomas in the Bible is a story not of Thomas. It's a story of us.
Yeah.
And even the resurrected Christ who is alive, there are doubts that creep into my mind. Is this real?
Yeah.
Am I truly saved? Whatever the doubt, there are doubts.
Yeah.
But again, if we cling to the resurrection, how many fewer doubts do we come against in that instance?
Absolutely, dude. And I always say, are there going to be question marks on the?
Sure.
Yes. And that's how we often live. Do you remember, the man who told Jesus, I do believe, help my unbelief.
Yes.
I'm more concerned with helping particularly the next generation, but everybody, every generation, on let's get really locked in on this.
Yes.
Right? And then, okay, there'll be questions that come and we'll deal with them as they do. But if you base your faith on something other than the resurrection,
yes,
and then somebody can dismantle that or seem like they can with smoke and mirrors, what am I going to do?
Right.
What am I going to do? And I think the resurrection, and for the fact that Paul ties our hope and our faith to that principle, the matters of first importance is key.
Yes.
So we only covered one last time.
We did. And so
dude, I forget what it was.
So last time it was who would die for a lie.
Yes, thank you.
Who would die for a lie.
Good. That's great. Dude, that's great planning on my part. Now, we were going to cover 6 or 7 of these things. Last week we covered one, but I don't remember what it was.
Well, here's my thought, because I think this is important. We teased it last week. This week, let's talk about the state of those disciples on Saturday.
That's great.
And the change that comes upon them 40 days later, because we teased on that, but we actually didn't do a deep dive into that. And then next week, let's talk about some of the common objections to the resurrection.
Of course.
So
I'll throw one more at you.
Yeah.
I want to get, I definitely want to talk about this one. And then one more that you might guess. It's always my personal favorite. And then, But so, I mean, in other words, everything you just said. Plus the one I want to squeeze in, if we have time.
All right.
We've got, what are we going here, dude?
We got another
25 minutes.
Yeah,
or so?
25 minutes. Yeah.
So, yes, the argument that you, I think, wisely referenced, picture Saturday.
Yes.
Which we've already talked about. Saturday is the day of they're fearful. The disciples are scattered. Jesus is dead.
Yep.
His body has been placed in a tomb.
Yep.
It is sealed with essentially an immovable stone.
And I think that's important to understand. It is, and when we say sealed, we literally mean this stone that took who knows how many men to place in front of this thing.
Which is not what they normally did.
No.
But in this case.
And not only that, but they literally would have put the stamp of Pilate on this thing. Basically, if you try to do anything to this thing, if you try to mess with this in any way, you will lose your life.
Yes. Well, dude, it's like it has such an official cloud upon it.
Yeah.
If you remember a few years ago, it was a horrible story. It was a young man in North Korea who took something from a hotel, some emblem, and he regretted doing it. Of course, that gave them just cause to imprison him.
Yeah.
And then he was sent back here, but he had died. He was a young man.
Yeah.
But just think of that image. He took something in North Korea that he was not supposed to.
Yeah.
So the fact that they seal it, they've got the stone there, they dispatch centurions,
Yes.
armed soldiers.
Yes.
This is not something, dude, it's kind of like when you see an active crime scene. There's been a horrible event, and you've got the police tape. You've got like you and I aren't getting in there.
No.
And if we try, it's going to be bad. So here's Saturday.
Yeah.
So again, go back to where I was on Easter. Just picture Matthew and picture all of them. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What they are quaking in their boots.
Yeah.
They are hoping that maybe now that Jesus is dead, their best hope probably at that point is, will they be able to avoid guilt by association?
Right.
Will the fever bloodlust of Good Friday evaporate to a point?
Right.
That they can kind of slip away in the background, go back to their jobs. And they've got an advantage. They can go up north.
Yep.
And they can find a rhythm, and that seems to be what they do.
Right.
To get away and to get back to their routines. And I guess they're going to spend the next few years in their minds kind of almost like, I hate to say it, but when you have a bad relationship and you break up and it's been intense, it just did not end well, and you kind of try to find a new rhythm, a new normal. That's the picture of the disciples.
Yes.
It's not inspiring.
Right.
It's never something we'd hold up in a youth talk, like you're going to give a youth talk, right? Tonight, the day we're recording, dude. You're not going to say, hey, guys, let me tell you about some awesome people of faith on this Saturday. Like you're like, oh, I better find another example, right?
No dare to be a Daniel here.
Yes, exactly, right? Exactly, man. It's like
no courage like David.
Yes. It's like be a cowardly weenie.
Right.
That's what you're.
That's what's
saying.
going on.
So that's how they're portrayed. Now, the other thing that's fascinating me is Matthew is one of the writers of the gospel.
Yes.
Mark was not an original apostle, so to speak, but the tradition tells us, and it certainly matches, and all the evidence is there, that he got his directly from Peter.
Yes.
I'll skip Luke. Luke's kind of an outlier.
Yep.
His connection to the story. And John.
Yes.
Who was there. You don't get these portrayals of these guys from other people.
Right.
You get them from them.
From them. Yeah.
Which, dude, who does that?
Right.
I mean, again, if you're making up the story.
Yes. Well,
why am I doing that?
Right. Let's be real. I mean, every time we tell a story, right? If I'm going to tell the story from my perspective, now I've got a little bit more bravado on me than most other people when it comes to conversations in intense situations.
Sure.
So some of that might be true.
That's new because you just watched John Wick 4.
That's right. Which we will be talking about sometime.
You watched John Wick 4. That's why you got that bravado. You're like, if Keanu could do it at 58.
That's right.
I can do this at 40. Keep going, dog. Keep going.
But there's going to be some embellishment.
Of course. Of course.
Regardless of how it went down, whether it was good or bad, there's going to be some embellishment to make me seem better.
Oh, yeah.
Than I was.
That's what we do.
We've got none of that here. We have these guys literally locked in a house, cowering in a corner, scared to death that the Romans, the Jewish leaders, are going to come in and get them and do the exact same thing to them.
Of course.
That they did to Jesus.
And let's be honest, dude. We'd be the same way.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly true. I mean, this is Jesus who raised people from the dead, who healed the sick, who had control over the most powerful beings that they had ever seen. I'm talking, of course, of the demons.
Yep.
And these men came in and arrested him and beat him and killed him.
Yeah.
And that's where they are.
Yeah.
all of the information about, guys, this is going to happen to me, okay? All of the 3 years that he's been preparing them, guys, I'm going to die. I'm going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to die. But guess what? 3 days later, I'm coming back. It's like you said, right? We're going to meet here on day 3.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Dude, and you're so right. We always do embellish. It just reminds me quickly, Lisa's father, Steve Leslie, who passed over a decade ago now. Hard to believe. He was funny, just larger than life persona. He told great stories, and he would often tell a story, and then he would kind of end it like, yeah. So I told them blah blah blah, and we'd all be like, wow, you really said that? And so Connie, my mother-in-law, said, it's like, Steve, did you say that? He goes, no, but I thought about it. So that was always my take. Right, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
If nobody trapped him, he might have left us with the impression that, and I told them.
That's right.
Why don't you go pound sand and blah, blah, blah. We do that.
Yeah.
How many kids tell a story? Oh, and then I was like...
And as the teacher, you're looking there. I saw you in that class. That's not what happened.
I saw you. You peed your pants and hope nobody noticed until recess, right? And so I love your point there, Nathan, because that itself, the portrayal. Now we're going to get to the change, but the portrayal of their frailty. Man, the only reason to do that is we are convinced we are communicating a message from heaven outside of us. To use John Stott, the late John Stott's analogy, like the gourmet waiter in a 5-star Manhattan restaurant that has a world-class renowned chef that people sign up reservations 3 months earlier. If you're the waiter and you're like, I don't really like where he put the parsley. I think the rice pilaf should be, like, you're done.
Yeah.
Your job is to get the plate as it was prepared by the chef.
Yes.
And pass it on.
Yes.
That's how they saw this story. So what do you do? Well, I don't really like that I look like a cowardly wimp.
Right.
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Because this is the truth.
Yeah.
And this is part of the story of Jesus that has to be told as it happened.
Yes.
It just, that gives me the chills.
And if we can just take a sidebar for a second.
Yeah.
That's how Scripture portrays us, period.
It does.
I mean, it does. I mean, you look at David, right? He's the archetype king of Israel.
Yeah.
And the portrayal in Scripture is he has moments of really high highs.
Yep.
But then he's got a lot of moments of really low lows. I mean, when you go through the story of David, we're not talking about, he makes this great leap onto the top of the mountain, and then he just kind of stumbles back a few feet. It's like he makes great leaps on top of the mountain, and then he's all the way back down at the bottom of the mountain again, trudging back up.
It's almost, dude, like he rolls down 222 Paris Cathedral steps. I don't know why that image popped into my head right now. Not like he gets there at sunrise, and then.
For those of you who know, you know.
If you know, you know. And if you don't, shame on you for not knowing. For a low, low price of $100, Nathan and I will tell you. No, we won't do that here. But, dude, absolutely. That is the portrait of humanity of the best characters.
Yep.
So you're right. Old Testament. I mean, dude, Moses didn't get into the promised land for his sin. The Scripture is clear about that.
Yes.
And David, you're right, who is the standard bearer of all the kings. The good ones and the bad ones after him are measured against him.
Yep.
And wow, there was just an epic fail, as the kids used to say. And so to tie that into this resurrection story, it's this to me, Nathan, I would call this, if last week was the who would die for a lie when they know it's a lie.
Yeah.
This week is your classic before, after evidence, right?
Yes.
How do I know this diet program works? Well, here's the before picture. Here's the after picture, right? We do it all the time. How do I know that, this new energy pill is going to help me, well, here's the before picture, and it's like you're eating popcorn.
Right.
It's my life. You're watching Netflix, and then the next thing you're, oh my goodness, you're like, chopping on a tree like a lumberjack and all that. I mean, that's how advertisers do it because they know they're trying to furnish evidence. Now, we know sometimes they manipulate.
Yes.
But so the before picture is what you just described. It is the weak, cowardly, oh my word, what's going to happen to me? But this is where, again, it ties back to last week. The historians will tell us, well, Christianity spread through the Roman Empire. Why? Because there were people like Peter, Matthew, Thomas, that took the message of the Christian faith to many parts of the world. Well, what are you talking about?
Right.
At risk of their death,
right.
Risk of persecution. And now we see them bold.
Yes.
They're proclaiming. Look at Acts 4, dude. I looked at that this morning because I knew we were going to talk about this today. Just to summarize it quickly, Acts 4, you've got Peter and John dragged before the Sanhedrin. It's exactly what you said earlier. They forbid them to preach and teach Jesus, the resurrected Jesus. And they say, yeah, we're not going to do.
Right.
We're not going to do what you're telling us to. We're not canceling that message. And they say, who should we obey? God or men?
Right.
We're going to obey God. So wait a minute.
Right.
Who are these people?
Right.
It makes no sense unless they saw the risen Jesus. And I would add one more thing. That same risen Jesus that they saw also emboldens their faith with the sending of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
So they're both linked. But the resurrection is at the core of that.
Yes.
That Jesus defeated death. The picture, dude, the before and after picture is staggering. Mm-hmm. Have you ever noticed, Nathan? I think we may have talked about this before. Like if you read Peter in Acts 2, Acts 3, he sounds like Jesus in the Gospels.
Yes.
All of a sudden you're like, he never sounds like that in the Gospels.
I know.
He's like kind of complainy and suggesting things and making promises he can't keep.
Yeah.
And then you see, he's quoting the Old Testament.
Yeah.
He's so locked in. It's incredible.
Isn't that what we see with all of them, though? Look at James and John, right? Sons of Zebedee. They're the sons of thunder, and they've earned that name.
Yep.
And their posture, every single one of them has changed, right? Peter, who's willing to whip out the sword and chop off the ear, right? All of their fight that they have when Jesus is there gets deflated. Then Jesus comes back and the Spirit comes upon them, and they're not willing to kill for the faith. Now they're willing to die for the faith.
Yeah.
There is such a dynamic turnaround and change that happens to them. As you said, we have this picture of them before Jesus' death, during Jesus' death, and then after Jesus' death.
Yeah.
And we see this beautiful transformation that we are supposed to see, right? This is who we are, whatever it is, warts and all, this is who we are.
Yeah.
And then Christ comes in and does a work in our lives.
Yes.
And there's a change that goes on. And now this is who we are after. And, you've said it many times. Sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes it's two steps forward. But there's a change that begins to occur.
They're different people than they were.
Yes.
Which takes us right to the heart of the gospel, right? 2 Corinthians 5:17. If any man is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old's passed away, the new's come.
Yep.
So, the changed lives of those followers needs to be given press.
Yeah.
Because, again, all you have to do is ask somebody, so how did this message spread?
Yeah.
How did it go out into the world? Why are we talking about it today here in Harford County, Maryland, 2,000 plus years
23,
later? Crazy. It's just a staggering picture of the power of those changed lives. And that's all the resurrection.
Yeah.
And what I love is you would almost say you didn't have the story. All you had in the story of Jesus was up until the point that he died.
Yeah.
And you had nothing else. It's ridiculous. I'm doing it for the sake of argument. But today you've got churches and people spreading the gospel and cathedrals and orphanages that are founded in the name of Jesus. And how did you get there? I think the only thing you could invent is what happened.
Yeah.
To explain it.
Yeah.
Because it makes no sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, dude, I think that argument. So we've got, who would die for a lie when they know it's a lie?
Yeah.
And the radical
Yeah.
character change of his original followers.
Yeah.
When they're the ones that are telling the story.
Yeah.
And people just, you're right. Particularly in that male-dominated patriarchal age,
Yeah.
you don't make yourself look weak.
Right.
Even the virtues Jesus taught, like meekness, gentleness, were considered. Humility was not considered a virtue.
Right.
It's shocking. We're so used to humility. I think is considered a virtue today because of Christianity.
Yes.
Because you read all those Greek Roman philosophers prior to, it was considered a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
So
in the way he turns upside down, right? You talk about these virtues, but also the treatment of widows and orphans, the treatment of women, the treatment of children, right? I mean, no, do not forbid the children to come to me.
Yes.
When the children were the lowest of the low.
Yeah.
No. Exactly. Let them come to me.
Oh, dude, and we see it. I mean, the very founding of orphan rescue mission.
Yes.
Is uniquely historically Christian.
Yeah.
It was children weren't seen as image bearing,
right,
precious people. They had to, in that world, you proved your worth.
Right.
You proved, even adoption is interesting. I've read a lot about this in J.I. Packer's work, Knowing God, in chapter 20, 21, The Sons of God. It's one of the best chapters I've ever read of any book, period. Go back to the Books podcast. And he just compellingly makes the point that in Roman culture, adoption was often based on you didn't adopt little babies. That's more current.
Right.
Today, if you adopted, you would adopt usually a strong young man who had proven his strength and worth in some way. Mm. Think about that.
Yeah.
How counter the gospel is to that.
Yes.
No, the helpless and the needy. The worth has nothing to do because in and of ourselves we have nothing to bring.
No worth,
other than we are loved by Him.
Yes,
and we're made in His image. So, yeah, dude. That aside is there. Can I get my other one in?
Yes.
My third one.
Yes.
And we can do some more and next time and kind of do back and forth with the objections because that I think will prepare people to think about what does this look like in the real world.
Yeah.
When people come back at you, et cetera. And so I'm looking forward to that. But the one I do it almost every year, dude, is the fact that in all four Gospels, you can look at this. So in Matthew, it would be chapter 28. In Luke, you'd start looking at chapter 23 into 24 to cross to resurrection, but really 24. In Mark, I should say, you'd start looking at chapter 16.
Yep.
And in John, you would look at 20 and 21. And you can see this, all four Gospels, without exception, the first witnesses of the empty tomb are women.
Yeah.
No exceptions.
Yeah.
There's not an outlier out there. Well, this one suggests it was a man. Maybe the woman came later. The Gospel writers are going out of their way to tell us. So, again, if they are concocting the story, they're the dumbest people on the planet. Yeah. Because, again, when you concoct a story,
right,
you get to do whatever you want. Dude, I'm doing my MFA program at Wilkes right now, and I'm writing a lot of stories.
Yep.
And we just did an exercise recently on third-person omniscience.
Yep.
And my professor said, and it's an online class, but she said, remember, have fun with this. She put, quote, God of this story.
Right.
But you know what she means.
Yeah.
You do whatever you want.
Yeah.
If you want a character doing this, that's your decision. If you want to tell us what a character is thinking, but not tell us do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You're not limited where if you're a first-person narrator, you don't know what's in the heads of other people. So I thought that was interesting. I was thinking about this, that they have a chance to write whatever they want.
Yep.
If they're making it up.
If they're making it up, yeah.
And they would choose to have women as the first witnesses in a day and age. And again, we always like to stress this.
Oh, yeah.
This is not the Bible's view. This is the culture in which the world of the Bible was written.
Yes.
The culture rejected really the validity of female testimony.
Yep.
In most judicial contexts, it wasn't admissible.
Yeah.
when I used to teach, where you teach now,
Yep.
Nathan, and would do apologetics like you and I both taught,
Mm-hmm.
I would often give the example. I'd pick a male student, and I say, okay, now let's just say, guys, these three people are in the room, and it's Billy, it's John, and it's Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and Sarah, you see Billy one day picks up a chair and starts bludgeoning John with it, you know? Yeah, I like to do those things in Christian schools.
That's right.
You know, we put those good images in the kids' head. And I said, and then, Sarah, you run down the hall and you get Mr. Bell.
Yeah.
Mr. Bell, you know, these boys and Billy's bludgeoning John, or whoever I said did.
Right.
And you were to say, really? Now, was Tommy there? Was Joseph there? Was Eric there? No, it was just me. To kind of shock them a little bit to see, this is how women were seen.
Yeah.
Like, until a man saw it,
Right.
We don't really care what you saw.
Right.
Okay. Dude, that to me is atomic.
Yeah. Oh,
In
yeah.
all four Gospels,
Yeah.
it's women
Yeah.
that are the first eyewitnesses of the empty tomb,
Yeah.
or Jesus himself. Mary Magdalene in John's Gospel gets press. The women that are mentioned in Luke 8 that resurface again in Luke 24. They're why would you do that?
Yes.
So I love that argument.
Yeah. And that is so profound because, again, if I'm going to make something up,
Yeah.
then in this story, right? If I want, it's almost backwards, right? If
I
I'm
know.
going to put a piece of fiction out there,
Yeah.
in this day and age, then the women are the ones who are going to give the testimony,
Right.
right? I mean,
Right.
that's essentially what I'm going to do. Is if
Right.
I'm going to post a piece of fiction,
Right.
you know, this is a supposal,
Right.
Right? In this day and age, that's what's going on.
Right.
We know that's not the case.
Right.
All four Gospels have been verified as being historically accurate. In fact, Luke has been touted by Christians and non-Christians
Yeah.
as being a historian of the highest caliber.
Oh, it does impeccable research.
Yeah.
You know that from his introduction.
Yeah.
You know, which that's a whole other subject. But yeah, he's so clear
Yes.
about the investigative work, the eyewitness testimony, the
Yes.
reports, the synthesizing these details and laying it out. Oh, it's an incredibly
Yes.
researched document. And interestingly enough, it would have had to have been.
Yes.
Matthew was there. John
Yes.
was there. Mark has Peter.
Yes.
Which the tradition really reinforces. So Luke, what's he left with?
Yeah.
Many accounts.
Yes.
Many stories. All these eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
Including women. It's incredible.
And one of the things that we didn't say. So here's another one.
Yeah.
Because this is again, well, right. They all basically wrote the same thing, right? So that just means that they were all in it together.
Ah, right.
Now, Greg, you're doing your writing course, and
Yeah.
so talk to us about why this is a problem.
Yeah. You mean the objection
Yeah.
that people
Yeah.
would say this? Yeah. So in other words, the charge would be like collusion.
Yeah.
What's interesting, because there's so many ways to go on this, but if it's collusion, what do people do? How many crime movies have you seen?
Oh yeah.
Where people. I was watching The Wire recently. I've kind
Yes.
of gone back
Yep.
to The Wire, and I think in the first season, there's the cops they do something stupid. I think they actually they try to prove them tough guys to go into this project.
Yep.
And this one kid is sitting on his car, so one of the cops beats and hurts him worse than he intends.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other officers, it's a terrible scene, but basically says, no, what happened was, and then he goes to the next one. What happened?
Yeah.
What happened was,
Yeah.
no, that's collusion.
Yep.
That is a fabricated story. And the Gospels, while they tell this, are so nuanced
Yes.
and so different
Yes.
that it doesn't look like collusion.
Right.
Yes, the general story is
Yes.
there. So to me, dude, it's a classic example. You're on catty corner, at an intersection.
Yep.
I'm on the other side. There's somebody from a parking lot away. We're going to describe what happened,
Yes.
and you're going to see evidence of overlap,
Yes.
but individual details that these three people
Yes.
could never have gotten together.
Yeah.
That's what you see in the Gospels.
Yeah. And that's what I tell my students, right? I give the example of a mall. So, Mrs. Bell and I, we go to the mall over the weekend, and we run into 6 of our students in the food court.
Yeah.
And all of us are asked to recount those events.
Yeah.
Well, I may only talk about Mrs. Bell and I, and then the one student who I had a conversation with.
Yes.
So I haven't mentioned the other 5.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they weren't there. It's just, to my recollection, they weren't an important piece of the story.
Right.
This was what was important. It was I was having a conversation with Johnny.
Yeah.
Where Mrs. Bell would look at it and, she said hi to each and every person. So when she's recounting the events, she will tell you, oh yeah, we walked up and I said hi to this person, this person, this person, this, and,
yes.
and they were there. And then, I spoke to 2 or 3 of them. And then, it's going to look different because the pieces that you're looking at are different. And so when you read the Gospels in this story, these people are mentioned, same exact story in a different gospel, they're not.
Yes.
And so,
dude, I love that example because that covers, you're right, many aspects of the gospel. Often you'll see the story of Bartimaeus. Was he the only blind man, blind Bartimaeus? Because another gospel says there were 2. Right. Well, one seems to be the spokesman. To me, those things reinforce authentic eyewitness testimony. Now, if an investigator said, okay, I got Nathan Bell's story, I've got this student, Tommy Smith, who was there, I've got this. They're all telling a story which tells them, and they're a little different details. If Tommy says, no, I was in North Carolina, I wasn't at the mall, you got a problem.
Right.
If, he's talking to you and Nathan says, the mall, no, we went to Ravens Stadium.
Yes.
I don't know. Then you can start finding some contradictions. But if anything, the individual nuances confirm the story because you're getting eyewitness testimony.
Yes.
Then you look for they were at the mall. They were in the food court.
Yep.
There's these little details that come across. And when you really do a fine-tooth comb, looking over the Gospels, dude, it's always built my faith. Never shaken it.
Well, because again, you say Tommy's in North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
Well, if the other 5 of us are like, no, he wasn't.
Right.
Who's lying?
Well,
that's the thing is like,
another great thing. You can weed out the false narrators.
Yes.
It's a great point.
And that's what the early church did to care and preserve the Gospels.
Absolutely.
Wait a minute. Why do we have over 200 witnesses saying this where we only have 5 witnesses saying this?
Yes.
And they did. Again, you look at Luke. Luke was so intentional and so careful about his investigative process and documentations. I mean, he has, it's clear to us that he has a friend. He is trying to put the gospel forth to him, this person, Jesus, to him.
Right.
In whatever capacity. And so he wants to make sure that this friend is getting the most accurate picture possible.
So how would we sum this up, dude? I think we've done 4. We would say so far we've covered who would die for a lie when they know it's a lie.
Yep.
We've covered the changed lives.
The before and after.
The before and after of the disciples.
Yeah.
We've covered the women.
Yes.
Being the original eyewitness testimonies. And then this 4th one that you've introduced, Nathan, I might call the
collusion.
Yes, the evidence of non-collusion.
Collusion delusion.
Yeah, collusion delusion. Oh, brother, that'll preach, brother. Collusion delusion. Come on now. Give me an amen. But yes,
hallelujah.
The nature of I think of eyewitness. That was my little Easter week series. The rich textured detail of eyewitness testimony. There's a wonderful book that's been written that's just called The Eyewitnesses of Jesus. It's a scholarly work. Bauckham, I think is the name.
Okay.
I'll have to double check that. It's on my Kindle. In fact, let me look because I've used it recently in my series.
Yes. Yep.
And it's a very, very good book. If somebody's looking for a pretty scholarly source, and watch me not be able to find it now. Hold on, let me do a search on my computer. It would come up. Eyewitnesses. Yeah, Jesus and the Eyewitnesses by Richard Bauckham. And it is second editions done by Erdman's Publishing.
Okay.
Grand Rapids. It originally came out in 2006. They did a second edition in 2017. And its entire premise, and it's thoroughly researched.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a massive volume, but its entire premise is that all the Gospels read like eyewitness testimony.
Yeah.
So he examines eyewitness testimony from the ancient world.
Yeah.
In source after source. Some of it, dude, is very hard to follow. But then he just goes through line by line and shows all of these little details that speak of eyewitness account.
Yes.
Very faith-building, encouraging work, which deals with the resurrection, but it deals with the whole of Jesus' life. So there's so many resources.
Well, I mean, Lee Strobel, A Case for Christ, is still it's a great resource.
Great
I mean,
book.
This is a journalist from the Chicago Times.
Mm-hmm. I believe so, or Tribune.
Tribune, yeah. And just his wife became a believer, I think, and started talking to him. And so he basically, his goal was to set out and show his wife that what she believed was wrong.
Yeah, and he couldn't do it.
And well, so much so, right? He starts here. Well, he actually travels over to Europe to find some of these ancient manuscripts and try to look at the validity of this. Yeah. And initially comes to the point where he's like, okay, I can't disprove it, but I'm not going to become a believer. But then over time he does. And
do you remember he does a lot of his chapters or portions with interviews with experts in a classic, almost investigative reporter type way. How you do it. Some really great stuff. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Strobel. But dude, wait a minute. Strobel is open to the thought that the earth might not have been created in 624 literal hours. Sorry, dude, I had to throw that one in there. You can take it out and post if you want. But I'm thinking, what a valuable resource. And again, it's about the essentials.
Yes.
It's about the essentials. So, we can debate. He might get to heaven and find out he's wrong.
Right.
But what he's right on is very helpful to,
and one of
the believer.
One of the keys for him, again, was the resurrection.
Yes.
And that's really why I brought this up, was because for him, I mean, he is such a master. Again, I mean, he was an investigative journalist. For this big, like you said, I think it was the Tribune.
I think it was. It wasn't a, he wasn't doing it for the...
the Aegis.
Oh, dude, we had our first slam of a local... I thought the Aegis, and I was going to say for the Tawny Town Gazette. But let's just say the Harford County Aegis, right? All due respect to you Bel Air Aegis readers. Yeah, I mean, if that, you'd be like, oh, okay, work for the Aegis. That's good. But when you mention a major, internationally known, respected paper, you're thinking, this is a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, and even lesser, I would say, is, you mentioned it last week, Josh McDowell's More Than a Carpenter.
Yeah.
Now, he takes a lot of those things, I would say, Lee Strobel does the deep dive into all this. Josh McDowell basically says, here's the thing, now go look it up. Here are my resources.
Right. Yeah, because he had these books that were called Evidence That Demands a Verdict.
Yes.
That are almost encyclopedia entries of all these things. And More Than a Carpenter was a very... I haven't looked at that book. I'm going to, dude, in years. In my early years of following Jesus, I gave that away all the time.
Yeah.
Or would reference it. And he's got several of these things that we've talked about in there. He popularized some research at the time. Well, dude, I look forward to doing this.
That's right.
We're at a point now where I'm going to go another 2 hours and we don't stop. So.
Well, my friend, we will be back next week with our part 3 and final part of the resurrection. So this has been good. Until the next time, Greg, we just rock the Casbah.
Yes.
Thank you again for listening to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Once again, please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you ever find yourself in the Forest Hill, Maryland area, please feel free to stop by at 135 Industry Lane, and you can get all of our service times and information at christfc.org.
These Go to 11.